My name's Jemima Reynolds. I'm the Health Programmes Lead at Trekstock, and we're really excited to be doing Lifting the Lid on cancer and mental health tonight. Thank you so much to Alex King, Steph Davies, Leanne Pero and Alice-May Purkiss, who are going to be your experts for this evening. We know it's been a really, really hard time for you all, so we think lifting the lid on mental health is so important at this time. We know how hard it's been and how important it is to be kind to your mind. We'll give you a chance to ask questions throughout, and Alice will have a look at them and we'll be able to answer as many as possible. Just drop them in the chat below. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to your lovely host for this evening, Alice-May Purkiss, who wrote the wonderful book, Life, Lemons and Melons, and she is an incredible person and has had cancer herself at the age of 25. Is that 26. Right, Alice? 26.
Close.
So welcome tonight to Be Kind to Your Mind. Thanks, Alice.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Alice and I'm going to be your host for this webinar this evening. Webinar makes it sound really formal, doesn't it? But yeah, as Jemima said, I'm a writer and journalist, and I'm also a member of the Trekstock community because I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2015 when I was 26. But today is very much not about me. Today is about the brilliant panelists that we've got here, and we're here to talk about mental health and cancer, because looking after your mental health is crucial at the best of times, let alone when cancer's thrown into the mix, and let alone when there's a global pandemic on. And I'm sure you've all had, you know, moments where things have been difficult, and hopefully this panel and this webinar, as I said, sounds formal, this evening will help you with that. And we've got a great panel here. We've got some experts, and I'm really excited for them to share their kind of thoughts and feelings with us about cancer and being kind to your mind. So yeah, as Jemima said, if you have any questions, there's a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can type your questions into there and then they'll pop up so that I can see them and I can make sure that we answer as many as possible. Yeah, so any questions, fire them in the Q&A box, or if you want to put them in the chat, that's also fine, and I'll ask our brilliant panelists to share their thoughts. But enough of me yammering on. I want to introduce you to the panelists. So what I'm going to do is, one at a time, I'm just going to ask you guys to tell us your name and a little bit about yourselves. I'm going to start with Steph.
Hi, I'm Steph and I run Life After Cancer. So I had Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 15, 16. And many years later, I realized the impact of cancer just doesn't simply go away. So I started coaching adults who've had cancer. And I've been doing that for about 4 years now. And I also live in Walthamstow, if you missed it earlier.
Amazing, thank you. And Leanne, I'm going to come to you next.
Thanks, Alice. Yep, so I'm Leanne. Hi, everyone. I've basically set up a project called the Black Women Rising Project. So it's a cancer charity for people within the BAME community. And I set that up just shortly after my survival, basically, from stage 3 breast cancer at 30 years old, which was in 2016. And I set that up just because, exactly like Steph, I realised that the cancer doesn't go away once you get an all-clear diagnosis. But also, in terms of the needs of my community, I felt that the needs were being unmet. So my project, yeah, basically is here, and 3-4 years later, we're still going strong.
More than strong, I would say. If you don't know anything about Black Women Rising, do look them up, because Leanne and her team are doing amazing things, so do check them out. And last but not least, Alex, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Alex King. I'm a consultant clinical psychologist. I lead the team providing specialist cancer psychological care at Imperial College Healthcare. That's an acute cancer centre in West London. We kind of look after the sort of people as a whole cancer center through a kind of whole range of sort of treatments, including kind of people of the younger age range and sort of, but not the kind of TYA sort of range, the kind of 16 to 24, not specifically, although many people do still sort of choose to be treated at Imperial, but the kind of whole adult range.
Amazing, thank you. And I have to ask you, Alex, your accent suggests you were not originally from Hillingdon.
You have 3 guesses.
Oh no, I'm really bad at this game, don't ask me. Tell us.
Well, I mean, we have a lot of people here. I'm pretty sure somebody can hazard some sort of guess. I don't want to give it away. It's my one bit of kind of mystery.
I tell you what, everyone can listen while we're going through this evening.
Excellent.
And they can drop their suggestions.
I will reward the successful, answer.
Is it like 10 points to Gryffindor?
Yes, points, yes.
Brilliant. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, guys, for being here. As you can tell, we've got a really, really wide range of experience here and lots and lots of insight, I'm sure. So I'm going to kick things off with a question for Steph. So, Steph, you kind of alluded to this already, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. And on your website, it says that cancer shaped your life, so you created a space to support others in shaping theirs. What was it about your cancer experience that led you to the work that you do now with Life After Cancer?
So after chemo, I quickly realised that the impact of cancer just didn't suddenly stop, which I think, well, for me, I just thought, you finish your treatment, kind of a bit of a full stop, I guess, and it's not, it feels like a comma, it's like, cool, you come up for a breather and you're into the next phase. So for me, conversations around cancer decreased. The support structure that I got used to just wasn't there, and to a point, for me, I just felt I had to turn up to appointments, like, they're going to look after me, I'm going to be all right, and they weren't there anymore. And there was an assumption, I think, from the outside that everything would just kind of go back to normal, whatever we think that is, because the treatment had ended. And then for me, I was 15, 16, so I was quite young. In addition, 11 years later, I'd finished chemo, obviously, and consultants had explained that I'd probably go into menopause, age 30, and I had a 10% chance of conceiving. These are things that I weren't told, 11 years ago. Pretty big things that you don't want to kind of miss out on, right? Mm. So they told me to freeze my eggs. And I just realized at that point that, this kind of impact of cancer wasn't going anywhere. So I really wanted to just create a space for people, whether they were kind of 2 weeks out of treatment, 2 years, 20 years, it really didn't matter. The fact that we've all been through this, I just wanted to create a space for us to come together, to support each other. I think a lot of us hear that, I get it, and you can talk to someone in a different way when you know that they've been through a cancer experience. And it just kind of, I think it just lowers your shoulders, doesn't it? It's a bit of breath of fresh air when you know how someone else is feeling.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry.
No, you go. Sorry, Alice.
I was going to say, I think what you said there about it being the end of treatment being a comma, I think that's really, really powerful. And I think I'm sure that there's lots of people there, like in the audience, who will agree with that. And Leanne, are there any kind of parallels? I mean, I guess there are, because there was a gap that you saw that you filled with Black Women Rising, but were there any parallels between what Steph was talking about there and your experience? And did you find that your mental health was supported as well as you hoped throughout treatment?
Yeah, I think if we take the Black Women Rising element out of it, number one, I was a young woman, and I think that's all it comes down to. I think anybody being told you have cancer in your lifetime is a complete shock, let alone you being a young, fit and healthy human being. And I think exactly the same as Steph, like, for me, first and foremost, it was completely unexpected and completely out of the blue. Even though my mum has had breast cancer twice before, it still came as a shock. And I think for me, what I found really, really difficult was that there's two parts, I think, to a diagnosis. I think when you get told you have cancer, because for me, they had to put me, I was suffering from such bad anxiety, panic attacks and everything from the being told those horrible 3-4 words or whatever. Well, actually, I never got told, oh, you have cancer. I got told, I'm not going to beat around the bush, you've got cancer, because it was the same consultant that had treated my mum six months before, But you know, that traumatized me, and I went into they couldn't even get me to do any egg freezing or anything like that, because that wasn't an option for me, because they couldn't even get me into the hospital. I was so frightened, and my body just completely shut down, you know. And me, I'm one of those people, you know, I've run a business for 20 years. I've always been strong, and that all went out the window. It wasn't about that, you know, being told that just completely just took everything from me, and I had nothing to give, no energy, nothing, couldn't even get food in me, you know. I couldn't even eat. As soon I didn't eat for 9 days, you know, after I got told I had cancer. And no, my hospital didn't do anything. You know, they just they did say, you know, we've put you on the worry list. That's what they called it. The worry list. You're being watched. We're watching you, because right now you're the youngest on our list. So I was the youngest on my list at the hospital for having breast cancer. And they said, but you're also not coping with the news well. So, you know, it was almost like, Leanne, you know, you've got to find a way to be strong, because otherwise we can't start chemo. And I'm like, I can't even walk properly. I can't even get out of bed in the morning, let alone start chemo. So, you know, there was that part. And then there was the other part, obviously going through the treatment, which after I found my way in the swing of it, which you do, I think all of us just get on with it. And then it is, as Steph said, it's the aftermath, isn't it? It's that when all the doctors and nurses have gone away, and you're left out on your own trying to navigate a new normal, and nothing is normal. Your mind isn't normal. Your relationships are not normal. And most of all, as well, as young women, your bodies are never normal. You know, you cope with all of that, and everything starts to grow again, and you know, you start growing in places that you don't even want to. For me, hips, waist, everything, you know. And you know, you have to find yourself again, and that is difficult, because you're going back to basics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's so much in there that we could unpick, and like I think there's lots that we will kind of touch on as we're going through the day. Are you also drinking juice out of a tankard?
A tankard? What's that?
You are.
Oh, okay. Cheers.
Hilarious. Cheers. Mine's, it's just squash. Same. Alex, I think there's lots that we can take from what Leanne was talking about there. There was clearly a real gap in Leanne's care, and you're kind of an expert on this idea of psychologically minded cancer care. And I'd just be really interested to hear from you sort of what this means, and what do you hope that integrating psychological care and support into cancer care will achieve? I mean, just a small question.
Gosh, you know, it's kind of, you know, Leanne, you sort of give us a very sort of striking kind of picture of the kind of magnitude of the effect of that sort of disruption to kind of one's kind of idea of the world that sort of cancer can bring. And I think it also is a good illustration of what we would mean by kind of a sort of psychologically minded sort of cancer system. And its main objective is to treat cancer quickly and effectively. However, it's kind of, it will do better at clinical outcomes and also the patient experience and their quality of life if every step of the way has got a sort of psychological quality to it, appropriate to the task. So, you know, how people are talked to and prepared. Yeah. So the kind of communication, the interaction with your doctor, the moment, the timing, the kind of who else is included, you know, the language, etc. So that would be a bit of sort of psychological input that would go towards kind of a system being psychologically minded, prepared to acknowledge the shock. And certainly, you know, after that, we have usually a whole host of kind of, you know, procedures and tasks and tests at a time when people are feeling really, really scared and unsettled. And they may have it, you know, may they have enough resources within them to just gotta go with the program, or maybe it's just insurmountable. And I think, you know, making it feel sort of safe and doable for people, again, is a kind of quality in which it's not purely administrative. What the hospital says is go to this appointment, go to that. You know, maybe some people need a bit more active navigation. Others can maybe, you know, handle it a little bit more independently. And others, like you described, kind of really need more time, more space. to kind of process that, perhaps a bit more help to process it than to just sort of do the next thing. So again, being able to individualize the response, that's a kind of a, psychological thing. Obviously, the system needs to move fast, so it can't really personalize it too much. Yeah. But again, the sort of the ability to kind of really, talk about that reaction to a nurse specialist, for instance, would be the next thing in a sort of good system, right? And then, perhaps at the point where, you sort of get on with it, your threat levels have dropped a little bit. And then at that point, you might be able to sort of start learning about stuff like kind of, what does this mean? Where do I go? What else can I do? How can I improve my fitness? How can I prevent other things? So you've kind of, the system's helped you through the shock, and at the point where maybe you're receptive to things like kind of groups and information, support systems and so on, and kind of perhaps at the end as well, another point where a psychologically minded system would prompt people to reflect, as opposed to very technically kind of go, we've done the best cancer care we can do, good luck to you, which is understandable from a technical perspective, but it's not psychologically minded. So and if you notice, in all of these things, you don't really necessarily need sort of psychological professionals to deliver them. You need a system that's been designed and tuned and supported to do those functions.
Yeah.
With the psychological professionals like the specialists kind of attending to people whose problems are really indeed quite complex.
It's just about creating a space, isn't it, essentially? Like, that's what it sounds like from where I'm sitting. It's creating a space for people, like literally space to hold their emotions and their experiences within the kind of cancer care pathways, if you like.
To consider, to consider very much kind of sort of the psychological needs for safety, for security, for attachment, for reflection, for, a sense of kind of future identity, all those kind of qualities. These might sound very abstract, but they do end up being kind of quite concrete. So if somebody really does get overwhelmed and doesn't turn up to their kind of chemo radiotherapy, then people start to notice. Otherwise, that kind of struggle might be quite internal, quite sort of hidden from view. So we need the system to kind of, reach out and understand that those things might be happening.
Great, lovely, thank you. So, I mean, part of the reason I was asked to be on this panel was because I was diagnosed with depression before I was diagnosed with cancer. I've kind of lived with depression for most of my adult life. And I think that meant that I was kind of, in a way, sort of more prepared for the fall that came after treatment. I'm not saying I was an expert by any stretch, but Leanne, would you say, I mean, I know you talked at the beginning there about being really anxious after getting that diagnosis. Would you say that you had any understanding of mental health problems kind of before you had cancer, or was that struggle, for want of a better word, that often comes after, was that quite a shock for you?
No, I'd had mental health struggles growing up. I'd been through a lot as a teenager, and then suffered with really bad depression when a really long-term relationship came to an end at 27. So I knew about depression, but at the same time, when I got diagnosed, I was, as they like to say, living my best life. I'd just turned 30, had a lot going on. So I was in a really good place after undergoing 3 years of quite intense counselling. So I was in a really good place mentally. And don't get me wrong, I still, after, the diagnosis started to sink in, I was able to kind of reach for the various tools in my toolbox from what I learned from there to adapt it to my care. But ultimately, this was another trauma to add on top of the previous traumas, and they're all very different, and it's all very, very, one thing I learned to not do was to say, oh, I've been through this before. It's not that. Every different circumstance, I think, in life throws a different thing at you and a different experience, and I think it's very, very important to allow yourself to feel that, regardless of what you've gone through and what you think that's another thing. We don't know it all, and because I had gone through that before, I thought, it was actually when I got the diagnosis, so many people said, oh, you've been through so many tough times, you can get through this. And actually, you know, I'm not going to lie, I wanted to tell everyone to F off and tell them that actually this is a completely different experience. And actually, no, I don't think I'm going to get through this. I mean, even though I did, but at the time you don't know that. And I remember saying it very, very, very clearly. I've been through this, I've been through that, but this one is too big for me. I don't think I can take it, you know.
I think it's really interesting that you had that kind of, that toolkit of resources that you could rely on and pull out eventually when you came to terms with the diagnosis. And I think there's lots of people who go through cancer treatment who don't necessarily, they don't have that from previous experience, and they don't get that afterwards either, and they're kind of just languishing around somewhere in the middle of life, I guess, in a way. Steph, I would love to hear your answer to that question. I mean, I know you were a lot younger when you were diagnosed, but could you at 15 or 16 have any idea of the impact that cancer was going to take on your mental health?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, like you said, I was 15, 16, so very young. My mum had depression her whole life, so I understood it was, you know, in the world, basically, it exists. So I think that was quite helpful, because I think a big part of it is knowing that it's normal, you know, or it does happen to other people. But yeah, I had no clue. I think, like I said earlier, this expectation that finish treatment, there we go, cool, next phase, you're going to pop back into your life, you know, just like that. And there was a lot of sadness, you know, just this kind of, you know, that feeling you can't quite put your finger on it. You're like, I'm not happy, but I don't really know why. Yeah. And very hard to talk about when you're that age and going through your GCSEs, you know, picking your A levels. You're like, don't really care, just finished treatment. So yeah, a lot going on.
Was there a point where you realized, oh, okay, actually this is I'm feeling this way as a result of my cancer treatment, like as mentally, I mean, not physically? Was there a moment where you had that kind of realization? You were like, oh, I can pinpoint it to this?
I think it took me years, like years and years and years to really understand that. Yeah, for me, I think I went the other way, moved to London, spend a lot of time partying, just, you know, I'm going to have loads of fun and pretend none of this happened, to be honest. But for me, it caught me up, you know, because I think it does, doesn't it? It doesn't, you can't just keep putting a plaster over it.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've got to deal with these things you've got to deal with them. Otherwise, I always say that it'll explode out of you one way or another, and you have to address it at some point. Otherwise, it's going to be messy. Yeah. Thank you. Alex, what would you say to a patient who is looking to get more support for their mental health? How would you suggest that they approach their medical teams, or if they can't get support from their medical team, where else do you recommend people should go?
Yeah. Well, it's a kind of complicated question. I think we all would probably sort of say you need to help them to kind of sort of see what's kind of going on. I don't think that there will be anybody who will sort of not want, in a way, to respond to a, nobody in the healthcare system will be like, oh, I don't really want to respond to that request. It's just that reaching in and actually kind of really perceiving that information maybe a bit lower on the list of priorities over and above, let's get this kind of treatment done, let's plan this thing, let's plan that thing, let's plan the other thing, let's kind of sort of check everything. So their ability to kind of notice stuff and inquire sensitively may be limited. So the first thing is kind of help them. Yeah. Tell them I'm kind of feeling this and that and the other, you know, or I'm noticing this and that and the other. Now, if you have a preferred idea, tell them. Now, equally, if you are very, very clear that, you know, kind of you need a sort of specific thing, I think kind of asking for things in that domain really, really is helpful. It is helpful for healthcare professionals. Now, however, our experience is kind of clearly that, you know, it's not entirely easy or possible to know exactly what you need when you need it. Yeah, that's by definition the kind of, that's almost the definition of being in turmoil. You do feel lost. You don't necessarily know kind of what you need. So I think occasionally you do need somebody to kind of flesh that out, to kind of make sense of what you're thinking and feeling, to help you guide you. So if you do have a rapport with your nurse specialist, do go and speak to them. Yeah. If you don't have a rapport with your nurse specialist, and that's also possible, and you can't sort of, they don't work as a team and there isn't somebody else, you may need to kind of think about who is a bit sympathetic in the system. Yeah. Now, so you might need to find the person, yeah, to help you unpack and direct and navigate where to go. So look for people you can kind of trust regardless. It will help them if you're asking. Usually the people who are most constrained are, so, while you're in acute sort of context, are your GPs. Yeah. I was kind of quite surprised when I sort of realized that, for every GP in a year might have just maybe 2 or 3 or 4 cancer patients, in a year of their kind of whole thousands and thousands of contacts. So they're not going to be well versed in that. They'll get a, direct you to, general community psychological therapy services, which are going to be very well meaning, but not sort of in any way sort of designed or sort of tailored around kind of cancer experience. So a good relationship with your GP may be just what you need. Yeah. So if that's kind of available or possible, by all means, but they're not necessarily going to know the kind of qualities and the ins and outs of the system. So other kind of places that can do navigation and unpacking of that need. Yeah. Third sector helpline support lines are great. Whether it's your kind of local friendly cancer information support center at your hospital, whether it's a Trekstock line, whether it's a Macmillan line, breast cancer now, pancreatic cancer, lung, Nolan, whatever it is, they'll probably help you unpack it. So reach out to them. And I think the kind of the thing that definitely not to do to round it all up is to kind of wait for somebody to notice. Yeah. And I think there is this idea that, it is that sometime will be saved. Yeah. And somebody will do something and kind of really, really notice. And I think, people are well-meaning, but they may not and they cannot. And, really, really, really encourage people to be active on that.
Yeah, I think it's about communication, isn't it? As with most things, and it's finding that person who you can reach out to and say, I am struggling, I am finding things difficult. I remember when I was diagnosed, my oncologist, who I didn't see my oncologist that much, I saw my surgeon significantly more, but my oncologist said to me, oh, why are you on citalopram, which is an antidepressant? You don't look depressed. So I would literally never speak to her about my mental health concerns, whereas my surgeon, who I love, I was more than happy to speak to him, and kind of, he was my person and my CNS as well. So it's just about finding that gap, isn't it? That person who can help you. Brilliant, thank you. Steph, I guess, because you were so young, what support do you wish you'd had when you were in treatment that you didn't get, and how does that influence the work that you do now?
So just so I had treatment in Wales, just so you have I wasn't in London, so I just think what was on offer was very different to being in London. I was 2.5 hours away from the hospital. There was 5 adolescent beds in the whole of the country. Okay, sure. So I wasn't offered any support, but I kind of wish there was art therapy. I think is such a good way to explore how you're feeling, work out a way that it's in line with you in terms of how you communicate. A young adult support group would have been really nice, and I just think some one-to-one support to help me move forward from what was going on. And in terms of influencing my work now, I think for me, I'm just trying to offer as much as I possibly can. So I'm basically, when I run coaching workshops, I basically throw so many exercises at the wall because, not every exercise is going to stick with everyone, so hoping that they can take some tools away from them, and just that they find at least one way to express themselves when leaving the workshop.
Amazing. And I'm going to come to you later to ask for some of your most effective tips from your workshops, but more on that momentarily. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's great, and I think that kind of creative therapies is something that's often overlooked. It's something
I agree.
I do a lot of work on with Toby Peach, who some of you may know. But Leanne, one thing I also want to touch on, I think this is really crucial. We know that there are lots of people who aren't comfortable talking about their mental health or putting their hand up and saying, actually, I'm not okay. Sometimes for cultural reasons, sometimes because they're scared or they're ashamed. What would you say to anyone who knows that they need support but doesn't feel okay about asking for it?
I think it's really weird because I get asked that now, and then I say, well, look, Black Women Rising's here and you can come to us. When we're that first point of call. And for many people, we are that first point of call now, I'm getting hundreds of emails and messages and things like that coming through now. And this service was not around, 4 years ago. And obviously a lot of my work I used to obviously do writing, with my right-hand girl who's no longer with us, which was Simon Thompson, who was almost like my Asian equivalent, and we used to do a lot of work about the shame around cancer in our communities because of cultural taboos and myths that have plagued our cultures for years. If you've got cancer, then it's a curse and God's going to cure your cancer, so don't take the chemo, as if the cancer diagnosis wasn't hard enough, and then you're having to deal with these opinions and these unhelpful pieces of advice, or worse still, blame you for your cancer. You're too young to get cancer. I don't know where you got that from. I've heard it all. I've heard the worst things that people have been told about their cancer. Hence why this project exists. It doesn't exist for fun. I set this project up because there were so many people that needed help within our communities, and they were too scared to talk about it amongst their family and friends. But not better still, I would say even more disturbing was that they never felt they had the relationship with their hospitals or their nurses or their doctors. They didn't feel comfortable enough to talk to them about some of the problems that they're facing, So for me, that's been such an eye-opener to see that there's completely different levels of care amongst all cancer patients. There's people are being treated very different, and again, it's about relationship. I'm not going to say it always comes down to race, but I think it's also about relationships. I would agree with Steph, so to speak. I walked into my doctors and they said I was too young, so they misdiagnosed. I went 3 times before I got seen, and then when I went on to, when I finally went into treatment and things, what did they say? Unhelpful things like, you've got a better chance of winning the lottery than having cancer at your age. How helpful is that? And I think there's so much to be done around education, and this constant thing of you're too young, all it does is it deflects blame onto us and think, well then how comes I've got it? That's what they ask. That's what so many people say. White, black, indifferent. Why have I got it? If no one else has got it, why have I got it? Because this is the language that's being used. So there's so much to be done around education. And I think coming on to what you asked Steph in regards to what did I wish that was around at that time, I think everyone has their own way of dealing with things. I don't think that there's a one-stop shop for stuff. I'm a very creative person, but I know some people aren't. That's not the way some people express themselves. But what would have been fantastic, which I didn't even see any evidence of, was a list of services and all people that you can call, numbers, projects, free therapies. There's so much gifting going on in the cancer community as well, where people can take advantage of free gifts and things like that to cheer them up. There's no one's brought like something together like that where you can give that to people and say to people, well look, this is what's going on out here, this can help you. I got a free Stella McCartney scarf when I was going through my treatment to go over my bald head. So many, and it cheered me up, just little things like that. So many people didn't know. And do you know what? I did not know that there was a support group for people within my community just down the road operating from my hospital. I didn't know. I found out 2 years later when I started my own project. So yes, a lot of
back to that communication again, isn't it?
They're failing. A lot of hospitals are failing. You can't, not every, I mean, most people that come to me have a bad relationship with their hospitals and their nurses and things, you know, unfortunately. Don't get me wrong, there's some fantastic people out there doing amazing work, and I know that the NHS is stretched. But, you know, that's not happening. But I agree with Alex. I do think there is an element of being proactive. I can't fault that enough in terms of us having to take our mental health in our own hands and actually saying, listen, fair enough, I've got no one here, I've got this, I don't know what's going on, but there's Google, you can look, you can be proactive and have a look at things out there, because there's so much out there for everybody. So I think there's an element of that.
It's the value of peer-to-peer support as well, isn't it? Because yes, like you can get help from psychologists and professional mental health professionals, but actually sometimes what you need is somebody who says, I get it, I understand the pressures you're facing from your community, or yes, I've had breast cancer too, or yes, I had cancer when I was 15, you know. I think there's lots to be said for the power of that peer-to-peer stuff, and you know, that's why Trekstock exists, it's why Black Women Rising exists. And yeah, I guess you're right, it's about looking for those resources. If you're finding that there's gaps in your hospital, you might be able to find those gaps are filled elsewhere. Steph, what's the most common problem you encounter in your work when it comes to navigating mental health issues and cancer being thrown into the mix as well?
I think just keeping in mind that I work with adults once they finish cancer treatment, it's probably anxiety, the fear of the cancer coming back, and how we manage that. And just the weight of that, you know, I think we all know what that feels like. But that is something that comes up probably in every session. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you've spoken a lot about having a toolkit, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but there are often things we do on a daily basis, aren't they, to really make sure that we're being kind to ourselves and making sure that we're checking in with the conversations that we're having with ourselves, like what's really going on up here and what we have control over.
That's such a big one, isn't it? I read a quote recently that said, a feeling passes through you between 30 and 40 seconds, but it's the stories we tell ourselves about those feelings that linger. And I think that's really powerful. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God, yeah, it is the stories we tell ourselves that stick around, and it's the conversations we have with ourselves. And I think you're right, just having an awareness of them and picking up on them is crucial. And Alex, the same question for you as well. What do you think is the most common problem people have when when people who've been through cancer have when it comes to their mental health, and how do you think people within the medical profession can better address this?
Well, the finding yourself again that sort of Leanne kind of discussed is the kind of key challenge. Now, the interesting thing about this is it can be liberating, but also very difficult. You know, so you know, particularly in sort of when one is younger, you know, you're kind of, it's such a disruption of your kind of ideas about yourself and the world and how things are going to go. You really need to kind of, it really disrupts things enormously in a way that is perhaps not so disruptive when you're kind of 80 and much more, you know, you've seen it and done, you know, cancer, you've seen it, and you've got an idea that, you know, illness is going to come your way. Whereas that idea doesn't really exist when you're kind of younger. You don't have the idea that illness and kind of is going to come your way. So finding yourself again can be sort of considerable. That might mean a lot of sort of different sort of choices about work, relationships, kind of fertility, family, etc. Now, and the degree to which one is in a position to kind of make those changes or is flexible and adaptable, and maybe, you know, the same level of challenge will be kind of very different for people with a different level of, you know, social resources, personal resources, relationships, the kind of, you know, what you've got to throw at this problem, the support and so on. So I think that kind of task really can be you know, very, very easy. Some people are like, yeah, no problem, I slot straight back in. Kind of, you know, for some people it's vast, but it is a task for everybody. Finding yourself again and assuming that you know, and that's assuming that in a way you've managed to kind of get out of this. But if this is an ongoing story, you've got a kind of advanced ongoing kind of cancer, that's yet another challenge. So I think that challenge, finding yourself again, might involve quite a lot of disruption, and disruption will come with a lot of emotional turmoil. Yeah, that might take the shape of anxiety about the future, which is a bit another way of saying, you know, please can I have some control or some predictability again? I didn't really want to know that this shit can happen, but now I do. I don't like it. You know, at sort of a, you know, that's glib, but at an intense level. So I think that's the kind of essential question. You know, sort of how well people navigate that. Now, it is a bit of a tall order to ask kind of, you know, hospitals and, you know, medical systems to do much about that. You know, they're very concerned with the next patient and where they're going to zap them.
Yeah.
I think there are certainly things that would help. You know, the proverbial health and well-being event. You know, everybody will maybe have this idea that there's meant to be at least one event at the end of one's treatment, which kind of prompts people to look at living in a healthy way, reconstituting some sort of healthy identity, finding the sort of sources and lists of support. That is pretty patchy. Attendance of patients at this is also extremely patchy. Yeah. So I think things kind of really don't take a great shape towards that side of things. I don't think there's a sort of really systematic process by which we kind of help people sort of find themselves again. There's a few bits and bobs. You know, Steph has, you know, very fair point about the kind of, you know, sometimes you do need individual kind of help to pull that together again, and other times very general available resources will be okay. I just think that, you know, purely the kind of, you know, medical nursing kind of treatment side of acute kind of cancer care, he probably isn't gonna, you know, the best they can do is, you know, communicate decently and, you know, give you some kind of courage and hope appropriately about things.
And point you in the right direction of people who may have more resource to help you.
Yeah.
And Jemima popped a link in the chat there to, if you scroll back to 7:05, she popped a link to some of the signposting that Trekstock have in there. So if anybody wants to look at resources that might be available, that's a really, really great place to go. And I have one quick question for each of you panelists before we open. We've got a couple of questions from the floor, but I always talk about having an arsenal of tools to support your mental health, because Leanne, as you said, there's no like one-stop shop, fix-all, band-aid solution, and it often takes a couple of things to have an impact. So I'd be interested to hear from each of you. I'll come to you each in turn, but basically I'd be interested to hear some of the coping mechanisms that you've developed to support your mental health in your life after cancer, or Alex, in your case, in what sounds like it's probably a very stressful job. So, you know, for some people meditation works, for others it's journaling. For me, it's getting my body into increasingly cold water. So yeah, I'm going to come to you first, Leanne. What tools do you have in your arsenal? Or maybe if you can just tell me your number one tool for managing your mental health.
My number one tool has always been giving gratitude.
Love that.
And that is just simply writing down 10 things I'm really thankful for in the morning. And it's just as simple as that. I do a lot of other things now, but at the very, very basic level, it would be writing 10 things I'm thankful for. And what that does is it just triggers, for me anyway, and you know, I do a lot of gratitude practicing with lots of people as well. I do it in all my coaching that I do with young people and stuff. It's such a proven tool that works, but it allowed me to see that the very things that I was very thankful for when I felt at the worst point in my life, I was able to see things that I was really thankful for. And you'd be very surprised at the things you'd be thankful for when you don't really have much to be thankful for at all. But just small things. It could be just having a warm bed to sleep on. You know, I know I'm going through treatment, but I'm thankful that I've got my warm bed to sleep in. You know, things that a lot of people don't have. Warm clothes, warm, access to, heating or food and things like that, just really small things. And actually what I found was that really, really helped me as I was going through my treatment, but not just my treatment, my whole life.
I love that. And I think gratitude's like a muscle as well, isn't it? The more you work it, the stronger it gets. Amazing. Thank you, Leanne. And Steph, what about you? What would you say is your number one tool for coping with your mental health?
Top of the list as well as gratitude. I think just changing the focus. But the thing that after that is I just skip for 10-15 minutes in the lounge with my headphones in, and it's amazing.
With a skipping rope or like
with a skipping rope? I've had that question so many times. People have this image, think it's hilarious. People around the block. No, skipping rope, kids one because I'm short, and put my headphones in 10 minutes and just like sorts my day out. I'm not saying it's easy. I don't think any of these things are easy to do. But I know it's going to make me feel better to do it. Different things.
It's a habit forming thing as well, isn't it? And once you get into the habit of doing it on a regular basis, it gets easier a little bit.
And I think you start missing it, don't you?
Yeah, fab. Thank you. And Alex, what about you?
I'm probably more on kind of I suppose kind of healthy habits are kind of a very sort of core thing, and in lots of ways very basic. But I'm kind of practicing my kind of gratitude every time I kind of walk out of hospital and kind of go, today they didn't keep me in. And I'm kind of trying to write it into my script that at some point it's going to get me. I'll be very disappointed if I get something else. Like, I've done this whole career here trying to figure this thing out, and I kind of go get a stroke. What the hell? But the stats are such that it's very likely that it's going to something of that nature is going to affect you. So I suppose trying to kind of learn from people to adopt an expectancy that at some point I'm going to have to deal with this sort of stuff, and it's not going to be any less shocking. But I suppose some inoculation. Because I hear the sort of stories and just the shock and the suffering, and I suppose that in a sense is like that's the human condition, and some sort of ability to be grateful for the fact that today it's not happened to me, but also an openness to the fact that you really have no control, and not sort of in a way hinging on some sort of magical thinking that it ain't going to happen to me, trying to really work towards the idea that whatever happens we'll just deal with it.
Love that. Fab. Yeah, great stuff. And yeah, mine, as I said, is swimming in increasingly cold water. I'm going tomorrow, and I believe the water temperature was 7.4 today. So
oh my God.
It's going to be bracing. Okay, so I'm going to come to a couple of questions now. So first one from Sarah here. She says, my issue is that I feel like no one can tell me that everything is going to be okay, because they can't. It might come back, it might not. How is a professional or anyone meant to help you when they cannot change the outcome? It almost is what it is, which can be hard to swallow. I suppose actually that's kind of what Alex was just talking about there. Is there anything that you want to kind of expand on there, Alex, in relation to Sarah's point?
I would sort of say that, that nobody will help you by kind of offering more assurance or certainty or control. They might help you to kind of realize that you kind of need to shift the perspective from like actually getting an answer to living without an answer, and living the best way you can every day, making the most of it. I often talk to people about live as if it's not going to happen, while also knowing that it might bloody well will. And kind of tolerating that uncertainty, not without being paralyzed by it. It is a fundamental, like, nobody can tell you how long you're going to stay alive. Like, we all have that uncertainty built in. But suddenly it becomes real, but it wasn't less real before. The cancer diagnosis is now manifestly in your face, so that's really the thing, that you already kind of lived with a certain uncertainty, and now you've got to get better at it.
I think it's Sophie Savage, who is a writer. She does some amazing stuff around cancer. She's had brain cancer for quite a long time, and she says that basically when you've had cancer, you've just been put on notice of your mortality. And I think it is hard to face sometimes, but also, like Alex says, you kind of have to do the best you can to make the most of every day. And I know that's such a cliche, but It's a cliche for a reason, right? Another one we've got here, it's hard to make plans for the future because it feels as if there's a grey cloud to it. You might not be able to go because you have to have checkups every 3 months. Steph, any thoughts on this that might help Sarah here?
Yeah, so I think it's just checking in with yourself how far in advance you're happy to make plans for, you know, maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 4 weeks. I think when we think of the future, it's always, oh, in a year's time or in 5 years' time, I want to be X, Y, and Z. Yeah, so really finding a time that works for you. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you. And from Claire here, not really a question, more of a statement. And I very much agree with this here. I don't think our NHS services are correctly equipped with the skills or time to support mental health. And I think we've kind of touched on a few of the ways that you might be able to get more support from outside of your hospital. But I'm just going to take this one here because I've started, so I might as well finish. You say, I turn up to my treatment appointments looking okay and feeling strong, but the reality of my situation becomes apparent and I cry. Every time the nurses almost always ignore my upset and carry on. It's so isolating and lonely. And I think this goes back to what we were saying before about finding that person. The nurses on your chemo ward or in the radiotherapy suite or whatever, they might not have that time, but it's about finding that person who does have the time to support you and asking for that help as well. And yeah, as we've talked about a few times, kind of peer-to-peer support as well is crucial. So finding somebody who can say, I get it, and you know, Trekstock's got a community of people. So yeah, it's just about reaching out and not being afraid to do that. What have we got here? I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma at 20 years old in 2016, and I really resonate with the whole separation anxiety with the hospital. Hands up if you felt separation anxiety from your hospital. I did. Steph did. Leanne, did you feel separation anxiety? Yeah. And I suffered with that for about a year after remission. I would find any excuse to go back there as I always knew that was my safe space. I don't think having a cancer diagnosis has ever really sunk in, and I'm not sure it ever will. But now I'm so passionate about making young cancer patients' voices heard. Leanne, have you got anything that might be helpful for Helen? Maybe you could talk about if there's a way that you've created a safe space away from your hospital, and also about how elevating young cancer patients' voices has kind of helped you as well.
I think one of the things I would say to everybody actually that's asked these questions and everyone that's here, I think one of the things that we all have to learn, and I'm still in that learning phase as well, is to be so much more self-compassionate. You know, we have to, you know, just kind of back off ourselves a little bit. We're allowed to feel how we want to feel. You know, it's okay to feel the way that you do. I know people are talking about, worried about the future, you know, constantly crying and breaking down. And, you know, I think one of the things that's pointing out to me, and I know this because I've been there, done it, and still writing the book, you know, self-compassion is key. And what I realized is when I allowed myself to feel all I wanted to feel and stop being this kind of girl that needed to keep being strong for everybody else and everything else like that, and actually allowed myself just to feel some of the things and some of the traumas from what I was going through and really own them, those are the things that's when I started to see a change. And how I started to see a change was, as the kind of messaging of what everybody said here, was find that person. And for me, what I really, really found was I found a counsellor, and I found a trauma specialist who had also had experience with cancer. And that was just via Googling and, you know, things like that. And I found a trauma specialist in cancer, and I've been with her for a year, and she is fantastic. You know, and that helped me navigate some of my feelings that I couldn't get from friends and family. But that also was the catalyst of me to realize, okay, well, there is a space for me to create something new. And that's when I was able to create Black Women Rising, and that's also helped me. So if, you know, people are wanting to create projects, there's room for them all. You know, if you're wanting to create projects, you know, if you're wanting to, you know, create some amazing ideas because you found a network of people, you know, I know Trekstock are fantastic. If you go to them with an idea, they're like, yeah, how are we going to do it? You know, so again, get in touch with Jemima, get in touch with people and just say, listen, I've got this amazing idea, and I want to be able to bring people together. Let's do it. Again, if the mental health stuff, which I know for some people who I know that have joined in this group, is huge, you know, that trauma simply cannot just go away. They're not even in a place where they can rationalize their trauma at the moment. And what one of the things I want to say to people that have come on and who feel that way, it's okay to feel that way. It's it's fine to feel that way. You know, you're not weird. You know, your feelings are not unjustified. You have the right to feel that way. And I will never forget that first month of being told I had cancer. That, till this day, still gives me the shivers. You know, how I felt for that first month. And I felt everything. And do you know what? If someone around me sort of said, oh, come on, get on with it, you know, blah, 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 I would have probably sworn at them, you know. It's not easy. It's not easy, you know. It's not easy to just quickly switch the brain and say, right, that's it. And you could be the most proactive person. It doesn't mean you can just go, right, that's it, let's get into gear. It's a process. And that process needs to start with self-compassion first. Okay, and it's not just around the diagnosis. Even after cancer, when you've got your flabby bits, you know, your chemo fat or whatever you want to call it, because trust me, I beat myself up a million times, you know, with the weight gain and everything else like that, you know, and or anything else that you've got going on, the hair loss or whatever. It starts with self-compassion first, always. Absolutely. And that's the way to lead to next. Sorry, I rambled on, but I just needed to say, because sometimes, you know what, I think you come onto these talks, right, and there's some people that really come on behind the scenes, and I know we're running out of time and all of that stuff, but it's people have come on here for help, and they need to know first and foremost that we're human beings. Like the technical stuff and that is important, and I get that, but there's some people, like I know there's some people on this call that they're struggling really badly, and I think that people need to know, like, we can give you these tools and tips, but ultimately it's okay for you to feel how you need to feel. And that, when you start owning that, and when you start allowing yourself to just feel that, if you don't want to get out of bed today, don't get out of bed. There's times, listen, I run 3 businesses, everyone knows I'm busy, but if I ain't getting out of bed, if I don't want to get out of bed tomorrow, I'm not getting out of bed. A lot of people don't know that about me. I won't get out of bed if I don't want it, because it's self-compassion, you know. If my body wants to burn out and I can't move anymore because I've still got fatigue 3-4 years later, I'm not moving, you know. And I think that's important. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now, but just wanted to say that.
No, I think it's so important, and it is absolutely crucial, and it's something that I bang on about a lot. You know, kindness is absolutely key, and I think there's something really, really powerful in remembering that you have feelings for a reason. You know, we're not robots. We're humans, and we feel feelings because things are hard, and it's important to acknowledge that. I have 2 questions that I want to ask before we call time, and they are both for Alex. So the first one, Alex, I think this is really important. What about if you're having really severe mental health difficulties? How do you know when it's time to step up your care?
So kind of really severe would sort of probably mean that, you know, you're sort of suffering kind of, you know, very frequently kind of high levels of emotion that also would impact how you can function. You know, I think it would be the main kind of question is beyond how you kind of feel inside, which is very important, it can be in itself very crippling, is if it's really kind of changing the way you behave outside, that you can see. So you know, in a way, sometimes, you know, people may find it sort of a bit hard to sort of make sense of kind of how they're thinking or feeling, but certainly you can observe the way you're behaving. So you know, withdrawal, irritability, things that are really behaving in a way that's really not like you, Yeah. Not for, a couple of days or, but for sort of persistent, it doesn't shift. Yeah. So the behavior is very, very important. If you can't really access your sort of thoughts and feelings. Yeah. If it's feeling like, this isn't me. Yeah. So it's a profoundly altered sense of kind of thinking and feeling, and a kind of profoundly altered sort of sense of behaving. Now, it's really important that we distinguish between the kind of distress and kind of emotional experience that you will always have, yeah, from kind of quite sort of profound and sort of disabling kind of mental health symptoms, yeah. So there is a kind of continuum of emotion and experience, yeah. It is appropriate that there's a little bit of it at one end that has a kind of a clinical sort of diagnosis, which sort of means that basically that isn't a place that's common, yeah. Everything else is common and sort of, really, really common, but this bit isn't really that common. That really needs attention, and it needs attention now, yeah. So that's not to kind of put people in a box or outside, but to actually kind of go, there is emotion, and then there is emotion that's really stuck, and behavior that's really altered in a way that's really problematic and needs specialist care. It can't resolve on its own, yeah. Well, not necessarily specialist, but a range of inputs, yeah. So I think those, I'd encourage people to kind of notice their behavior.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. And I remember there was a time when I was in treatment where I had some very, very dark thoughts, and that's when I was like, okay, I need to do something about this. And I went to my GP and I talked to my GP about it, and I knew that and there was a series of things, and I knew that my mood had been low for a long period of time, and it was just about recognizing that and paying attention to my own thoughts as well. And Alex, there's a great question here from Jessie, and she said, do you think there should be more of a shift to holistic approach with cancer in the NHS? As someone with incurable cancer, I found this has been the most helpful to me, probably because it's connected to the mind and being an empowered patient who is also a person. But I often come up against a brick wall when bringing up integrative stuff with my oncologist, and I've had to do the research myself. Before I let you answer that though, Alex, I'm just going to say I would definitely follow, if you don't already, follow Chris Hellenger. She is she's the founder of Copperfield, and she's a great advocate for advocating for yourself, and she's really brilliant if you don't already follow her at kind of the more holistic approaches, and helping other patients figure out what might work with their oncologist. But yeah, Alex, any thoughts that you want to add to that?
I mean, I think it's kind of, it's very, very good if you've got the kind of, the conviction and the kind of capacity to kind of add things to your cancer care. It can kind of cause friction when you sort of, in a way, expect kind of the doctors or the medical system to do more than they can. Yeah. I think, they are sort of steeped and trained and kind of learn a hell of a lot of stuff, but within certain parameters. So they're going to do the best they bloody can, the best side, their kind of view will have to offer. It'll, I often sort of say to people, I don't like to be treated like a number. Like, you really should wish to be treated like a number, because that means they've done it millions of times before, and it's well proven and well researched and very effective. And they're just saying, okay, number 2,592,000, please stand in line. And that means you've got the best odds. Yeah. Not, it's glib, but again, it's that idea that, it works, the system can deliver certain things. Yeah. Which is the kind of most robust sort of treatments. But I don't think that, people's experience will be that everywhere they'll find really integrative, really open-minded stuff. Yeah. Somebody might kind of get lucky and, find somebody who can do that and, have a good match. Yeah. But I don't think it's kind of really, you're going to find that an awful lot. I don't think that's also going to be happening an awful lot. I think person-centered is definitely going to be happening more, in a sense that, involving people when choices exist, yeah, you know, planning them in a more personalized way, all that kind of stuff. But that's still at the core, the treatment is still going to be the kind of main medical mainstay that your oncologist has kind of developed and you know, learned.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You know, there's lots of stuff that we can do in addition to the treatment that the doctors are giving us, the chemo, the radiotherapy. But you're right. You know, it's so important that you remember the doctors have done this a million times before, and actually that's an amazing thing. And yes, you know, maybe breath work or other holistic care stuff might be a useful addition. But yeah, it's important to remember that the doctors are experts at the end of the day.
And it's okay if you don't agree. Like, you know, they might be a bit frustrated and it's like, how can you not like my magic potion juice? But you know, it's kind of like, you know, the people are really you know, they have sort of strong convictions and sort of, you know, ideas, and that can cause friction. But it's okay not to agree. You know, you can agree to take a different path, but you know, negotiating that skillfully.
Yeah.
You know,
and it is
and
a
actually,
negotiation, isn't it?
you know, finding somebody who's willing to negotiate with you might be difficult.
Yeah. Great, fab, thank you. And I mean, we've already gone over a little bit, and there's, you know, I think we could sit here and talk about this until the cows come home, but unfortunately we do have to wrap this up in a nice bow. I'm going to hand back over to Jemima in a minute, but I just want to say, I think this is crucial. Remember that if you are struggling with your mental health, there are loads and loads of resources out there, and you are absolutely not alone. It's normal to feel a lot in the wake of a cancer diagnosis, but if it gets too much, there are resources out there. If you feel like you might be a danger to yourself or to others, or if you're feeling overwhelmed, contact your GP, your cancer team, or call the Samaritans. The Samaritans number is 116 123. And if you also feel like you are really in danger, you can go to A&E as well. So yeah, before I hand back to Jemima, I'm just going to say thank you so much to our brilliant panelists for joining us this evening and being so generous with their thoughts and their wisdom. And thank you to Trekstock for putting on this panel, asking us all here. I hope you found it as useful and as interesting as I have. And yeah, please make sure that you are looking after yourselves. So yeah, over to you, Jemima.
Just want to reiterate, thank you so much, Alex. Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Leanne. And thank you, Alice. That was absolutely fantastic. As you all know, one size does not fit all, and we have lots of things going on. We have everything from our Renew programme, which is a chance to get active with other people who get it. That's open to you if you've just been diagnosed or you're 10 years post-treatment. We get that being active and staying active is hard, but we know from what Alice and Leanne and Steph have said that that being active can really, really help with our mental health, and finding a way that you enjoy is so important. So have a look at our website. We've got Pilates, we've got the Renew programme, we've got Renew top-ups. Also, we've recognised that each one of you, whether you're post-treatment or just diagnosed, have different needs. And as we've just talked about tonight, the mental health is a thing that you struggle with, sometimes more once treatment ends. So we have some new spaces happening, one called What I Wish I'd Known When I Was Just Diagnosed. We're going to be rolling them monthly. What I Wish I'd Known When I Was Post-Treatment, and What I Wish I'd Known When I Was Diagnosed with Incurable Yet Treatable. We also have What I Wish I'd Known as a Loved One. So we've got lots of different spaces happening. Also, if you've only just joined the Trekstock community, in January we're going to be launching Welcome to the Trekstock community, so you can come and have a chat with other people who have just joined and be able to have a chat with me and Bryony, my colleague, and find out how we can help you. So continue to be kind to your mind, and happy Christmas to you all, and thank you again for joining us this evening. Thank you so much, guys. That was brilliant.